Thank you to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I believe I said this in a few previous videos alongside with the most recent kind of Procreate gallery tour. I have been kind of like falling behind on doing a lot of like Genshin Impact or like Honkai Star Rail fan art, and I feel like I'm a little bit feeling too much pressure from doing like kind of full illustrations of the characters that I want to draw. So instead, I feel like I'm going to be switching it up and doing a little bit more of like doing my typical sketch pages that I like to do. So we're going to start off with that today, and then in the future I'll pick a few more characters to do so we can kind of like knock them out and I can get to draw, I guess, like more of the characters that I wanted to draw in the first place. But with that being said, I'm not going to stop doing some of like the full illustrations like I usually do. I'll just pick a few here and there depending on like which characters I like, or if I want to test out like maybe a different composition or like an environment or something and I think a character would fit better, then I will do that. But for now, a lot of the characters that I do like the designs of or just like want to draw the characters of, but I don't want to fully commit to like one full illustration. I will be doing them more in my sketch page style, which I'll explain kind of what I mean by that, because I know typically visually it's not really considered a sketch because it's like mostly rendered to some point or like heavily colored and all that, but it's still very rough to me, so I call it a sketch page. And previously when I used to do these, they were a lot more rough and I wouldn't really render them all that much, but nowadays I render them like typically one drawing of the set of drawings that I end up doing kind of gets more rendered than the rest of them, and I leave the rest kind of like unfinished. A lot of them have like little scraggly lines, my sketch lines are visible and all that. But let's talk about first who I'm drawing today. So I am going to be drawing a few sketches of Kinich from Genshin Impact. I think that's how you say his name. I could be wrong. Like I said in previous videos, I have not caught up quite yet in Natlan because I just haven't really had time to fully commit to the story. And personally, anything that has like story in a game, I like to put my full attention on. And typically the Archon quest tends to run, I think it's like 3 hours plus sometimes, so I don't really want to commit to it quite yet. And I've been playing like other games and stuff in between, so I just need to find some time to fully catch up, and then I will understand a lot more of the other characters more fully. But I wanted to draw him because besides drawing Mualani a lot earlier, I probably will do a sketch page of her as well because I love her design and I think she's just like a super fun character and she's super cute, and I like Hydro characters in general for Genshin Impact. But also I want to draw Kachina, I think that's how you say her name, but I've also been meaning to like kind of wanting to draw a Kinich at some point, besides the fact that I've sketched him a few times here and there. I've done like pixel art of him and just like little unfinished or like pieces that I'm not like super happy with, so I wanted to do a little bit of sketching. I am going to be including his little, I was gonna say friend and companion, but he's kind of not really either of those technically, but Ahao, I think is how you say his name. I wanted to include him somewhere and we'll see how I end up drawing him, because I'm not going to be rendering him and sketching him the same way that I'm going to be drawing like my characters usually, because he is done in a pixel art style. So we'll head on to a different program once we kind of like finish up the rest of the coloring and sketching here, and then we can put him in afterwards. So usually for my sketch pages, I like to kind of focus most of my energy on one specific doodle, which in this case, it's going to be the one on the very right. And it typically is either the biggest drawing or the main focus in terms of like, if it could be size, or because I like drawing faces the most, sometimes the face that I like the most I will put most of my energy in. But after that, I tend to try to fill the gaps on the canvas. So right now I'm using I think it's an A4 size canvas, so about 8.5 by 11 approximately. And I started with the right, and then we shuffled kind of to the lower left and then back up to the upper left. And I like kind of just doing it that way, where it's like you pick a spot for your first doodle and then you can kind of fill up the rest of the canvas with all of your other doodles. This one's a little bit more sparse compared to some other pages I've done. Sometimes I include a lot of text or like other chibis or smaller doodles in between. But for this one, because I'm still not used to his design fully, I decided to just focus on 3 of them. I don't think by the end of this kind of session I fully understand his hair, so I might doodle him a little bit more in my sketchbook once I start that soon. Eventually I will, but I would like to just sketch some of the characters a little bit more so I can get familiar with them, and then it'll make it a little bit easier in the future if I end up wanting to draw them, because I kind of commit them to memory to some point after getting familiar with their design so that I get a little bit less confused, and then I don't have to heavily, I guess, like go back and forth and look at a reference to be like, oh, is his hair right, or is like, you know, like the clothing and all that. I can kind of just eyeball a lot of the things, and then when I need to really work on the sketch and make sure everything looks correct, I can go ahead and take a much closer look at the actual reference to kind of finish up like details before we move on to like coloring or rendering or whatever. But for the most part, the sketching portion is finished. I went ahead and changed the sketch color to be a purple. I will set it to multiply, and we can do a little bit of filling in the colors for my flats so that we can kind of do alpha locking and keeping all of my colors contained within the selection. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for now. And usually the color that I tend to use whenever I'm blocking in the flats tends to be the skin tone of the character, or just like the main color of the character, just because I use that as the base. So I start to color and shade everything on top of that first, and then we can kind of get more specific to where certain placements for other colors are. But once we have the base done for the coloring, we can go ahead and alpha lock that, and then we can start to do shading, starting with the skin, then the eyes, hair, and then clothing. So let's start with the little sketch on the very left, and we can get started with coloring. With our rough sketch done, let's take a small break to have a snack or two with our sponsor TokyoTreat and Sakuraco. TokyoTreat is a fun and exclusive Japanese snack box featuring unique and exclusive flavors straight from Japan. Each box is filled with a variety of full-size Japanese snack items like limited edition Kit Kats, unique flavored Japanese chips, and occasional Japanese sodas that are only available in Japan for a limited time. While Sakuraco is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that supports local Japanese snack makers, each box comes with 20 traditional, authentic, and artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese teas and a special Japanese tableware. The tableware that was included in this month's box is actually the Wakasa chopsticks. So for my box, I have received the black version. I won't open these up quite yet as I have too many chopsticks at this point, but these ones are super beautiful. Both boxes come with a 24-page cultural guide, and I love that it includes information regarding ingredients and all the allergens of each of the snacks, but also informs you of like little tidbits of information revolving around culture and traditions in Japan. So at the beginning of 2024, the region of Ishikawa was actually impacted by a devastating earthquake. But with the help of their dedicated and resilient communities, they actually have preserved all of their cherished traditions. So this month's box is actually in collaboration with the Ishikawa Prefecture to honor their strength and beauty. So this box has many snacks that are curated with their local artisan snack makers. Each month has a different theme, meaning that you get to try out a whole new selection of new treats and snacks every month. For example, TokyoTreat's box theme for the month of October is the Osaka Snackathon, while the theme for Sakuraco is the Heart of Ishikawa. Sakuraco always comes with a tea, so let's go ahead and give this one a try. I love the simple packaging for these, they're super cute. So this is the Bocha roasted tea. If you are a fan of tea and you have yet to try a roasted tea, I highly recommend it. So this is your sign to try it out. I was sketching out Masaki with a Mont Blanc because one of the snacks had a Mont Blanc flavor, which was this month's Kit Kat flavor. I really like this one compared to like previous Kit Kats that I've already tried. I also like the Earl Grey cake as well. From the TokyoTreat box, I really enjoyed the seafood flavored snacks, which there were plenty of in this particular box. I believe it's because Osaka has a wonderful seafood. So snacks like the koikea wasabi seaweed chips and the squid and pickled ginger tempura chips were perfect. Also, the dotonbori grilled crab sticks were super tasty as well. So if you would like to get a box for yourself or want to give these as a lovely gift to family or friends, especially when the holidays are kind of right around the corner, then check out the link in the description and get your boxes today. Thank you again to Sakuraco and TokyoTreat for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to coloring. So kind of back to the coloring, I went ahead and locked the flat color that we have laid down, which happens to be his kind of like base skin tone that I'm using. Then we can go ahead and start off with the skin and start to add shading and a little bit of lighting, whatever we want at this point. And kind of like how I like to separate it, I tend to do skin first. After I do skin, I tend to do eyes and hair because they are placed on top of the skin usually, so I can cover up any of like my messiness and all that. And I like to kind of like blend in the skin tone into the hair as well. And then last but not least will be like any accessories and the rest of like clothing and all that. And if there's an environment and like any kind of background, I would do that even before placing down my kind of like base color that I have currently down for the flats. So usually at this point too, I would change the background color even for like my sketch pages. Sometimes if I want like consistency, I would actually leave the normal kind of base color that I tend to use for my sketches, which is kind of like I don't even know how to describe the color. Maybe if I remember, I'll put like a swatch on the screen so you can kind of see the accurate color, because my webcam does not do my iPad color justice usually. It kind of makes it even more saturated, a little bit darker, sometimes faded. So it's kind of like all over the place, but I don't like to work on a white canvas usually. So it's kind of like has a different kind of base color that I usually put. And then I usually sketch in purple so that I can easily adjust the sketch color to be even more saturated, or we can change the hue to match whatever color palette that I want the rest of the sketches to be in. And you can see with my sketch kind of being kind of like on a multiply layer and having my colors underneath, every time I'm adding like colors and stuff, you can see that the lines kind of change a little bit more appropriately. I usually take advantage of this a lot, especially during like the line art for like the eyes and stuff. The eye kind of like eye line, upper eyelash-ish area, sometimes when I draw it very dark and I leave them as black, it looks a little bit too muted sometimes. So I like to add like other colors underneath, and then the line art being not pure black or like a gray, it already has like a little bit of tinge of color. It'll change alongside with whatever color I'm placing underneath. And then this helps just like for every other kind of line art that stays within my coloring, so that, you know, I don't have to do too much color picking when it comes to changing the line work too much. And usually, even though I like the fact that the colors change appropriately, in the end, by the time I like start to render, I will change the sketch colors to match a little bit more appropriately anyways, so it's not too big of a deal if it doesn't really match at like right at the very start. I usually change it to be a little bit warmer and a little bit brighter to match the skin tone, to give it a little bit more of that warm tinge, but like later on we will just change it and match the lines a little bit closer at the very end before we start to render and clean up everything. But do let me know if you guys have any specific characters, both from Genshin or I guess like Honkai Star Rail. I will also accept, I guess, like Ensemble Stars or Reverse 1999 for sketch pages. I kind of stopped doing sketch pages as frequently, except for like my OCs and stuff, just because I did them mostly whenever I did 17 sketches, like the K-pop group 17, and it was just like an easy way for me to compile a bunch of like doodles and like little moments from like, let's say, Going 17, which is kind of like their own little game show, reality show, whatever you want to call it. It's like a little program that they tend to do like different activities or games or whatever. Sometimes they just chill and have like a retreat, and it's just very cute. Other times, like I would watch concerts, I would take screenshots and then draw those, or like fan signings. And I treated it more like a compilation of just like little snapshot moments. And I didn't feel like just leaving like one little doodle per canvas and just having it very plain. So it's kind of fun being able to like mix and match some of the drawings together and have it I don't know, like overlap almost in a very like scrapbooky way, if that makes sense. But back to the process, you can see that after I finished with the rough colors, I went ahead and started to erase some of the lines, and I'm going back in to kind of change the sketch color to fit a little bit more appropriately. So I typically change a lot of the kind of like lines around the face to be a lot softer. Some areas I deliberately leave very dark, especially if you don't have like a background color or like colors that are not directly under the lines. Oftentimes you think they look dark, but then when you merge the layers, it ends up being like super light, and in my case it usually is a light purple. But after I changed the lines and I kind of merged my sketch with my colors, I went ahead and changed the background color to be a kind of like a light green, but I found the colors did not really match as nicely as I would like it to have. So I decided to put a kind of like an overlay layer on top of everything, changed it to a bit more of a greenish color. I did end up erasing around the face a little bit so that the face didn't accidentally get neutralized, since it's a little bit more on the reddish pinkish side. But then after that, I went ahead and lowered the opacity for that overlay layer so he does not look overly green, and then I went ahead and merged it. Then we can move on to the coloring and the rendering and cleanup phase, which I talk about a lot, where I just end up darkening certain lines. I get rid of a lot of my sketchier lines, and we can add shadows and just really basically kind of like refine everything to be a little bit sharper and a little easier for people to be able to read and decipher what my lines are without having too much like disruption everywhere. Now, whenever I do like sketch pages, like I mentioned earlier, I put my focus usually on one doodle or sketch, whatever you want to call it, first. I guess in this case it's just like a drawing. So the one on the very right is my main focus, so I'm going to render mostly the face and the hair as much as I can. Body is a little bit iffy because I'm not too attached to it. And then we will do kind of in order. So the second drawing that I did, I'll put like, you know, a certain amount of effort, but the least amount of effort tends to go to my last doodle. So depending on how I'm feeling, sometimes I really render everything out and I like make sure everything looks clean. I don't really consider it a sketch page at that point, even though I still call it that. It's just like easier to call like the format of like collaging and kind of having a bunch of random drawings all together as a sketch page, even though I don't think that's like the most appropriate title or like thing to call it. Oh well. But when I started doing like more sketch pages, like I mentioned, it used to be very rough and very quick because I would do, I guess, like a little bit of watching something and then I would pause it, take a screenshot, or I would pause it, doodle it really quickly, and then go back to watching and resuming the video. And it kind of stemmed from like the way how I used to sketch in my sketchbook, how I would start usually in like the bottom left-hand corner of my sketchbook. And as we start to fill up the rest of the spread, I just wanted to fill like as much of the space as possible. So sometimes you have like weird spaces where you think like, oh, I can't really fit like a proper headshot here. Maybe I have to make the headshot really small, but it makes sense to have like maybe an arm outstretched to fill in like a more smaller horizontal space, like all that. And it's just kind of fun to like squeeze and like change the size or like your effort or like the amount of detail you want to put into each individual doodle, because I do think it's kind of fun having one main focus or like a few drawings that have a little bit more high effort, and then like surrounding those ones are like a little bit like more scraggly looking doodles, things that look unfinished, or like really quick sketches. I just really like looking at full spreads of drawings or sketches from like other people's sketchbooks. So I don't know, I definitely think in the future, if I can, or if I find a way to kind of like compile some of my doodles and sketches, I would love to like just find a bunch of my sketches from my sketchbooks of my OCs and compile them in such a way and see if I can edit it in a way that makes sense, because a lot of them are kind of like standalone or not formatted great to be by themselves, if that makes sense. So I probably have to like play Tetris a little bit and see if I can fit doodles, like really cram them into like a spread for a zine or something. I think it could be fun to do, but we'll we'll see. It's like more things I want to do in the future for like small little projects, but I don't really have the time for right now. So there were a few things that I ended up kind of like missing when I started to like render his hair and add a few of the details. He does have like a diamond kind of like pattern across his hair. It's not exactly his hair highlights, but it's like a patterning going across. Like, I feel like Mualani has like little triangle versions, I think. I don't really remember if Kachina has like a pattern in her hair because I actually haven't drawn her quite yet. So I haven't taken like a close look at her design, which is why I want to do like more sketch pages in the future. Oh, also, before I did more like digital sketch pages, like I mentioned earlier, I used to do them in my sketchbook. But as I started playing games that had characters that I was like less familiar with, so like at the very beginning when I was doing Genshin fan art, I liked kind of doing sketch pages before I committed to actual like final illustrations. So I would do more of a very much like either like a T pose or a very just neutral looking pose and try to sketch and kind of like absorb as much detail from the reference to my brain to my sketch so that I could get so familiar with the character and be able to doodle them much more ease, if that makes sense. So hopefully with me doing more sketch pages, it will help me feel a little bit more comfortable getting back into drawing Genshin characters again, but also just being more familiar with their designs. I think this is also like the reason why whenever I've done like drawing from memory challenges, I think I've done one for Genshin, and then I did, I think, the VTuber one for Nijisanji En at the time, but because like I doodle so many of the characters in such a way, I commit a lot of details to memory. But at this point, because I haven't drawn a lot of them in a long time, I don't think I no longer have that in my memory because it's probably just like in my short term rather than my long term. But I definitely think it did help me quite a bit when it came to doing like drawing certain characters from memory. And for the most part, a good chunk of Genshin characters, I do think I can remember a good portion of their details up until parts of Sumeru. I guess like some of the characters from Inazuma, I guess I would struggle with. I guess Fontaine also, I have a little bit more experience drawing certain characters. Like I draw Fremine a lot. I think I know Linny and Lynette's outfit to a certain degree. And then Nouvelette, I think I know a little bit. Farina I do, Navia I do. It's like, it depends on like who I've already drawn before versus like just purely seeing them in passing. So I would like to tackle more of the Natling characters very, very soon. So hopefully in the future, like literally in the next month or two, I will draw the other Natling characters, whether or not it's for like sketch pages like this or like a full illustration or start to finish or an ASMR video. I will try my best to plan them out so that I can get familiar with them because I want to kind of progress with the story so I know more about them as well. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. I definitely feel like me kind of like playing the story will help me get more attached to characters anyway, so I probably should do that first before I commit to too many of the drawings so that I make sure that they're not too out of character. So in terms of the drawing process, I went ahead and made a new layer and I decided to use my sketching pencil to add kind of like a white outline around everything. And I like putting it on a layer above everything rather than below because it helps me correct a few of those stray lines that I didn't kind of correct when I was rendering and doing the cleanup. So basically he is finished. So we did all three drawings basically. Let's go ahead and get this little scrungly little guy finished in a different program. So I'm gonna open up Pixsquare. This is kind of like my pixel app of choice, especially on the iPad. So right now I decided to make a canvas of 64 by 64 pixels. Now the footage, I think I took about 20-ish minutes to really flesh him out. I am basically just eyeballing the kind of official art I found of him on Google. So I think this, like the proportioning and everything should be somewhat correct. I was counting the pixels to make sure that things were lining up correctly so that we could have an accurate representation of him. I didn't really want to fudge around and like figure out how to draw him in a stylized way without making him look super derpy. So I decided to just do a 1-for-1 basically. And then we can kind of like finish him up in Pixsquare, add an outline in here as well. And then once he's finished, I will go ahead and import him into Procreate and add him to the actual illustration and drawing with the rest of the doodles. Oh, I also flipped him around because I need him to be facing Kinich instead of like facing the other way. So we can go ahead and import it. I did save it with a transparent background so that we don't have to have a white box around him. And luckily 15 times the size was actually the appropriate size, and he's basically the correct size that I had my original little sketch of him as. So after that, I like to add text at the very end. So in this case, I'm adding Kinich's name alongside with Ahau's name at the very bottom. And I just think it looks kind of neat. I also forgot to add a grid to the background when I changed the color to green, so we'll add that as well. I think that's it in terms of what I like to do for like my sketch pages and all that. So I'll definitely do a few more in the future, and hopefully like super soon rather than like next year in this case, since it is already November. But here is the little time-lapse version. But I think that's it for today, and I'll leave you guys with the rest of the video without voiceover at this point. I hope you guys enjoyed watching today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!